Welcome. Today we're going to be looking at cellular respiration, our get up and go. Now, as you saw in the photosynthesis videos, there's a whole bunch of different chemicals that have to come together in order for cells to make energy. Today we're going to be looking at a couple of new ones that are unique to cellular respiration, and they are NAD ion and FAD, which are anabolic cofactors, as well as FADH2 and NADH, which are electron transport molecules. Now, these molecules are going to pop up during glycolysis and the Krebs cycle in cellular respiration. Now, unlike plants, we have to eat food in order to get the energy that our cells need to produce ATP, which means we're heterotrophs and plants are autotrophs. So with cellular respiration, we're going to be able to get that energy out of the food that we eat. Now, there are two kinds of cellular respiration, aerobic and anaerobic. Now, cellular respiration is the process by which energy from glucose is released in order for your body to perform life functions, such as movement, breathing, blood circulation, and pretty much everything else that your body has to do in order for it to survive. Your body and your cells require a constant source of energy in order for them to perform life processes. However, your body only keeps a small amount of ATP on hand at any one time, so your cells have to generate ATP constantly. They do this by getting energy out of the foods that you eat, like fruits and vegetables, or by breaking down glucose that's already been stored in the body as glycolipids or fat. Cellular respiration is the process by which these glucose molecules or glycolipids get broken down and repackaged into ATP energy, the usable energy of the cell. As you can see here, the photosynthesis and cellular respiration processes are a joint cycle. They start with light energy, which enters into photosynthesis in the chloroplast of plants. It then produces the organic molecules oxygen and glucose, which are necessary for cellular respiration to occur to produce ATP in heterotrophic organisms. This process then produces CO2 and H2O, which are essential for photosynthesis. So what we're seeing here is that the process of producing ATP as well as glucose is a linked cycle. What most people don't realize about this cycle is that cellular respiration actually occurs in all cells, including plant cells. This is how plants actually break down the glucose they make in order to produce energy for their own life processes. There are two types of cellular respiration. You have aerobic respiration, which requires oxygen, and anaerobic cellular respiration, which doesn't. The one that's going to be used primarily by your cells and produces the most ATP is going to be aerobic respiration. This is going to occur in the mitochondria and cytoplasm of the cell. The general formula for aerobic respiration is glucose plus 6 oxygen molecules becomes 6 CO2 carbon dioxide as well as 6 water molecules and 36 ATP. Before we continue, let's take a quick look at photosynthesis again. You'll notice on here that many of the reactants and products, as well as many of the in-between chemicals, are going to pop up again as we move our way through aerobic respiration. The first step in cellular respiration is glycolysis. This is where glucose is broken down in the cytoplasm back into pyruvic acid. When it does this, it's going to release all of that energy that was put in when the plant was undergoing photosynthesis to produce the glucose molecule in the first place. We're also going to see it kick out CO2. This is why when you exhale CO2. It's the CO2 that was taken in by glucose during photosynthesis in order to create all of that energy that we see stored in the glucose molecule. Once glycolysis has occurred, all of these materials, the broken down pyruvic acid, NADH, as well as acetyl-CoA go into the Krebs cycle. Now, this cycle occurs in the mitochondrial matrix because all of the enzymes needed in order to rearrange that material reside there. What this is going to do is it's going to supercharge those molecules, and it's going to make more NADH as well as FADH2, which are electron transport molecules, and it's going to take all of those molecules and that energy into the electron transport chain reaction. This is where ATP is created. This is also where oxygen is needed in order for all of those molecules to create that ATP. The oxygen is so important to this process because those oxygen molecules are going to be binding to hydrogen molecules as they get kicked off of NADH and FADH2 and binding to them in order to produce water, which is going to get kicked out of the system as a byproduct. And all of those broken bonds between NADH and FADH2 are going to be providing all of that electrical chemical energy that is needed in order to produce ATP. Because remember, all energy in your cells is stored in chemical bonds. By breaking all of these bonds between the hydrogen molecules and these electron transport molecules, you're producing a bunch of energy that's going to be used to produce ATP. All right, let's do a really quick review before we move on. In summary, there are 3 primary steps to cellular respiration, the aerobic kind. The first step is glycolysis, in which glucose is broken down into pyruvic acid as well as several electron transport molecules. Those molecules then get taken up by the Krebs cycle, where they are supercharged and a whole bunch more of them are made so that the cell can produce a whole bunch of ATP in the next step, which is the electron transport chain reaction, where all of those heavily charged electron transport molecules as well as oxygen are broken apart and recombined to produce water and a whole bunch of energy for the cell. Let's take a look at the other type of cellular respiration, anaerobic respiration. This type of cellular respiration occurs when no oxygen is available to your cell. There are 2 kinds, alcoholic fermentation and lactic acid fermentation. These types of cellular respiration processes produce very little ATP and are usually not used as a primary source of energy when your cell is trying to make ATP. Alcoholic fermentation is going to occur in bacteria and yeast. Our bodies don't do this. This is a process that's used by the baking and brewing industry in order to produce CO2 gases to make dough rise, or again, in order to ferment the materials needed to make things like beer and wine. It's a good thing that our bodies don't do this because we'd pretty much be drunk all of the time. That'd be interesting. Now, the type of cellular respiration, anaerobic respiration, that our cells do is called lactic acid fermentation. It occurs in your muscle cells when you're exercising a whole lot and your body can't supply enough oxygen in order for aerobic cellular respiration to occur. That burning sensation is your cells and your muscles telling you that you're overdoing it a little bit. It's telling your brain that, hey, we need more oxygen, or you need to tone it down because we're not getting all the oxygen we need. And this can be a problem, especially if you over-exercise when you haven't exercised in a while. Lactic acid is exactly what it sounds like. It's a type of acid that can actually break down your muscles during exercise or over-exercise. And when you do it too much, and if it builds up too much, it can cause a lot of problems and can even cause muscle atrophy, or the breakdown of your muscles after you've exercised. It's one of the reasons why you're often told by doctors and health specialists that if you haven't exercised in a while, to take it slow and work your way up so that this buildup of lactic acid doesn't happen. All right, let's wrap this up. So remember that with cellular respiration, there are two different types. You have aerobic and anaerobic. Both of these start with glucose and glycolysis within the cytoplasm. When you're talking about anaerobic versus aerobic, in anaerobic respiration, you have two different types. You have alcoholic fermentation and you have lactic acid fermentation. Alcoholic fermentation is only for the baking and brewing industry, where lactic acid fermentation is the one that occurs in your cells. Now, this type of fermentation is only there to help the glycolysis process continue to go until oxygen can return to your muscles and aerobic respiration can continue. With aerobic respiration, it occurs in the mitochondria as well as in the cytoplasm, and it produces the most ATP for your cells and is the process that your cells undergo in order to perform life functions. It produces 36 ATP and thereabouts. And remember, all cells, including plant cells, will go through this cellular respiration process because even plants have to produce enough ATP in order for their cells to perform life functions. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.